Did you know that it's South Carolina law that once in every 5th year, each county or the state will appraise and equalize properties under its jurisdiction? Today, Ebony Sanders, the Beaufort County Assessor, is meeting with our neighborhood representative councils at their meeting to give information about the process and the particulars of property reassessment.
And at this point, we're going to turn it over to Ebony Sanders.
Thank you. Can everyone, yeah, it's on. I asked for the mic because I like to move around and walk. I'm a fidgety individual. So if you don't mind, I will prefer just kind of move around. I want to make this very, it's an important topic. It's a sensitive topic, but I also want to make it as informal as possible to be comfortable, a comfortable topic. First of all, before I begin, my name is Ebony Sanders. I am the Beaufort County Assessor. There are 46 assessors in the state of South Carolina, and I'm one of 46, so I'm in a unique bunch. And before I really get into the meat of the information, I want to first thank Ms. Passament for inviting me. I do take pleasure in coming to speak and meet our taxpayers throughout the county and have an educational program with them. I also would like to thank Council Member Ms. Tabernack. She's wonderful. She's a wonderful supporter. Council is very supportive with our reassessment, and I appreciate her tremendously in all that she does for us. And also, I would like to thank the Resident Committee, Advisory Committee for allowing me to speak today. And each of you on part of your different communities in your neighborhoods for being representatives of your community. And what I want to task each of you today is to help me and help our office take the information back. I know this is being recorded, but take it back, have those conversations, and when assessment notices come out, we're going to talk about that. What I'd like for you to do is help your neighbors, help your friends, help your church members, help your individuals beyond the Sun City community read their assessment notices, help them navigate through as much as you can in our website, navigate through the assessment notes as well as our website, because the more individuals involved with this process and putting this information out there, it makes it so much easier for us, and it helps everybody in the end. So let's begin, see if this works. Let's see, I have a clicker here. And here, if I'm in the way, please, I can move. Oh, wow, it works. Good range, good range. So today we're going to talk about the assessor's office duties. We're going to talk about the quadrennial reassessment. That's what we're about to be tasked with in the near future. We're going to talk about assessable transfers of interest. Everyone in this room may not be an assessable transfer of interest, but there are a few individuals that fall into this category. We're going to talk about capping. Now, when we get there, we really need to talk about that and pay special attention to that. Let me go back. Well, this way. And with appeal process and any special exemptions that may be afforded to you that's mandated by South Carolina code. Now, everything that we're going to talk about today, or I'm going to highlight, understand it's mandated by South Carolina code. So to answer the question about the 46 counties, and I'm one of 46, but we're under all of the same South Carolina code of law. So we're going to talk about things that's going to apply to this county as well as other counties. And there's going to be some different unique things that we may do a little differently, but understand they're all based on what the code says. So to begin, I'd like to kind of start my presentation with an introduction to what we do and what we do not do. Now, here we go. Can this be heard? Let's see.
Misunderstanding about the role of assessors and how they affect the property tax that homeowners pay. When someone hears the term assessor, they seem to think of a scary figure reaching for their wallet. Not so. Assessors don't set tax rates. Assessors don't chase tax dollars. An assessor is interested in fairly determining property values, and they take great pride in it. Property tax is determined by a simple formula. Assessors only affect one of these variables, the value, and they do so with incredible accuracy. Assessors aren't tax collectors or even tax setters. They're just fellow taxpayers, and their primary goal is to make everything fair and equitable. Imagine that you're in a restaurant with two friends. One orders a hot dog, one orders a plate of caviar, and you order a steak. The waiter comes to the table with a total bill of $100, but he doesn't know how much each of you should pay. If everyone paid the same amount, the guy who ordered the caviar might be happy. But what about the guy who ordered the hot dog? Enter assessors. The food is your property. Just like these meals, some people's property is worth more than others. And it's the assessor's job to determine how much each property is worth. That's it. So in the same way the value of these menu items would need to be determined, an assessor places value on properties to ensure fairness and equity. After the assessor determines the value of each property, local governing bodies will set their budgets for the coming year. They set the tax rate in order to produce the dollars needed for their budgets. The value of a property does not affect the amount of property tax needed. The sum total of all those budgets is a set number that has to be divided up among all the property owners. So even if everyone's value was cut in half by the assessors, the tax rate will be raised in order to generate the same amount of tax revenue. The assessors don't determine the taxes you pay. They just determine the values of properties to keep everything as fair and equitable as possible. When you notice a change in your property's assessed value, that change is the result of a never-ending quest for fairness and accuracy. Assessors are graded on their performance, so there is a detailed system to get accurate valuations. First, the assessor looks at similar properties that have sold, their sale prices, and the terms and conditions of each sale. That's the reason your home won't just be compared to the place next door. Studying things like square footage, age, and location helps assessors determine how comparable another property is to yours. Even seemingly small details, like an extra bathroom or finished basement, can result in significant differences in value in two otherwise identical homes. Assessors maintain a thorough database of real estate information to make this process as precise as possible. Changes in value are typically the result of local real estate market sales or major changes to a property. Remodel a kitchen or finish your basement, and your property's value could increase. When you see your home's assessed value, you can rest assured that the number has not been drawn out of a hat, nor generated with anything but equity and accuracy in mind. Long story short, assessors are here to help, not trying to hinder. Their focus is accurate values, not tax collection. The only things an assessor chases are fairness and equity, and they take great pride in it.
Does that kind of give us a basis, a foundation? Could we please hold the questions? I'll get to you, I promise. Promise, won't forget about you. Do that kind of give us a basis of what we do?
So there's a lot of
Let's not play that again, okay? So that sets the foundation. You know, we do not set tax dollars. We don't collect them. We are strictly about value. Now, there are some exemptions that we're responsible for, and it's mandated by law. But overall, our office is here. Trying to make sure I get this right. Got to get directionally correct. Okay, it's here to determine value. So let's lead right into where that value starts at, or how do we develop that? Well, as we mentioned, we have a quadrennial reassessment coming up. Now, please do not say, well, it's quads, why are we doing 5? That's one part of the code in the legislation. I don't know why they called it a quadrennial, because it actually happens on the 5th year. So we're doing a quadrennial, and it's county-wide. It's not going to be certain segments of the tax population. It's going to be the entire county that's going to receive this quadrennial reassessment. And it's the Beaufort scheduled time period. It's not the entire state. So this is our period of time that we're going to actually revalue all the properties in Beaufort County. So let's talk about what actually is the quadrennial. So it's a program that we have to determine the values. We've established that. The values is based on an effective date. That effective date is 12/31/22. So kind of keep that in your mind, and I'm going to repeat it constantly to kind of home it on in, because there's some misconception about valuation. Unlike fee appraisers, and you're hiring an appraiser to do a fee appraiser report for whatever reason, either for financing or estate purposes or whatever, they maybe have a different effective date. Our reassessment date is December 31st of 22. So no matter what the market does currently in 23, we're frozen at that effective date. It's a mass appraisal process. Now, we employ the 3 approaches to value. We have 3 approaches. We have your sales comparison, your cost, in your income approach. Now, we know income doesn't work because we're not talking about commercial properties for your neighborhood. And cost approach, well, we could use cost approach, but as properties change in age or age itself, there's a depreciation that's attributed to it. So our main source is sales comparison. You remember on the video, we talked about the sales, and you're looking at similar properties. Well, that's the sales comparison approach to value. Now, in the mass appraisal process, unlike a fee appraiser, and all of my appraisers in the office, including myself, we are licensed appraisers, the mass appraisal process requires that we value the universe of properties, all the properties in Beaufort County, which is over 133,000, as of an effective date based on sales. We, unlike the fee appraisers, cannot pick and choose which assignments that we want to take on. Each one of the properties is an assignment that we have to value, regardless if it sells or does not sell. We do not have that choice by law. We use standard methodology and statistical testing. You remember on the video, it showed a hat and then just magically just jump out of a hat? Well, that doesn't happen in the assessor's office. We have to analyze the data, analyze the sales, analyze the actions of buyers and sellers to see how they're performing and reflect that information as a result of the quadrennial reassessment. Now, when we value the properties, remember the December 31st date? And we're going to value all the properties based on that effective date? Well, once the properties are valued, there's an assessment freeze. So regardless, I think I mentioned it before, and if I'm on repeat, please forgive me. Regardless of how the market is performing, either upwards or downwards after that assessment freeze, we're frozen based on that date and those numbers. Now, there are some exceptions, which I mentioned in one of the earlier slides. There is assessable transfer interest, and we'll briefly talk about that. But typically, most of our properties do not transfer interest, and the assessment freeze applies. This reassessment corrects any inequities in valuation because of transfers or sales that occurred. It's as of an effective date, and all the valuations for this tax year is going to have the same effective date, December 31st of 22, regardless if it's sold in 22 or not. Now, there's a breaking of the assessment freeze, and we're going to talk about ATIs, and that's when the assessment freeze is broken. That's one of the circumstances. So, let's see where I'm at. So, we determined that it's state mandated. We don't have a choice. We have to do this. And again, here's that December 31st popping back out at us, telling us again when we have to apply for it. We have to actually apply the valuations to the tax rolls. Now, we're going to mail our assessment notices around September of this year. So by the second week in September, they'll be in the mail. Okay, let's talk about appraisal models. So in the video, it actually showed how we don't just develop the valuation and out of a hat and we just come up with a number. No, we have models. And I mentioned before that all of our statistical testing is actually mandated by different laws. So the South Carolina Code of Law is one of the mandates that we have to use to come up with our valuations. The Department of Revenue, as well as the International Association of Assessing Officials. In this model, we group properties, like properties. We look at similar characteristics. Remember in the video it talked about that? We look at maybe your neighbor next door may not be as similar, may not be the property that we use. But we look at sales and we analyze those sales and look at those similarities and group the neighborhoods based on those similarities. So a neighborhood could be Hampton Village, or Avery, or Coastal Village. Depending on how the sales are performing and how those taxpayers the buyers and sellers are reacting. We are reactors to the market. If those markets are individually performing differently, we group them in their own neighborhood and their own appraisal model. As we mentioned before, there's 133,000 properties in Beaufort County in its entirety. Now, we just received, for our 1,300 appraisal models for the entire Beaufort County, we just received the pass letter from the Department of Revenue that our statistical measures and our valuations have passed the standards by the South Carolina Department of Revenue. We cannot move forward with the reassessment unless the Department of Revenue gives us that pass letter. Now, I'm proud to say that when I got that letter, my name on it, I'm going to frame that one, because that belongs to me. Because my team worked very hard. Matt, let me say something real quick. I have 2 of my team members here today with me. I'll apologize for not introducing them. I have my deputy assessor, Pamela Holmes, and I have Miss Jennifer Conti. Some of you may know Miss Jennifer, because she's in the Bluffton office, and she helps everybody. Everybody loves her. I cannot do without Miss Jennifer in Bluffton. Half the time, I'm always bothering her and asking her questions. But yes, and my staff, the staff here participates in handling our taxpayers for the 133,000 parcels, and also 1,300 appraisal models are our appraisers. They determine the values for those different appraisal models. Going back to the letter we received from the Department of Revenue, once we sent the statistics to the Department of Revenue, they analyzed our sale data. They sent us a letter saying, hey, you passed or you failed. Well, we got the pass letter. Woo, wonderful. This is the first time that we've got a pass letter on the first round in many, 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 many years. I've done 9 reassessments in my career, and this is the first one as a county assessor, and that's why I said I'm going to go ahead and get this frame. I'm about to head to Hobby Lobby and get that frame. Let's see if I can get, okay, here we go. Now, when you get your assessment notice, this is a kind of example of what it's going to look like. It may look a little different, but the information is basically the same, and let's go over it together. You're going to have a column there that's going to have your lots and your acreage. You're going to have your market value, your new construction, your cap, taxable, ratio, and assessed values. Now, we're going to talk about some of these columns. May not talk about all of them, but the ones that we really want to home in on is your market value. You remember I said your valuation as of December 31st, 2022? Well, that's the number that we're changing based on your market. New construction, if you have new construction of any sort, either new home or new porch or new patio or new pool or change or renovation, that new construction column will have that number there. If it's the cap value, we're going to talk about capping. Keep in mind, again, remember I said kind of put that in your mind, and we're going to talk about that to help, because it's going to help a lot of people. You have your taxable value, and the ratio is your legal residency. That tells you whether or not you're at 6 or 4% and you're qualified for the special assessment of the legal residence. And your assessed value is what you multiply by your mills to get your tax bill. Okay? So let's kind of keep some of those columns, it's particularly the market value and the cap value. In the taxable value, I'm going to go back to this slide shortly. And I think we're going to be using this particular slide once we start answering questions. So cap value, you remember here, we're going to talk about that. Okay, so here we go. Here we go, the cap value. What are we going to do with that? How does that help me? Well, 12, 37, 31, 40, remember I said it's all state mandated, and you can look this up on the legislation website with the code of law. At the time of the quadrennial reassessment, if market values increase more than 15%, the most a taxpayer can pay on is a 15% increase. So, like, what does that really mean? So this is how I simplify it for my taxpayers. Last quadrennial reassessment, which we implemented in 2018, you had a market value of, let's say, $100,000. Let's make it simple math. $100,000. In 2023, we're going to do here we are, do our next quadrennial reassessment. And your neighbors decide, the market and your neighbors and how the buyers and sellers in similar properties are buying and selling for $1 million. We know that the market has dramatically changed since 2018. We can all agree to that, okay? So let's just use that simple math. You got 100,000, and now everybody around you selling and buying for $1 million. At the time of the quadrennial reassessment, the most you can be taxed on if you've held onto your property and you're not a transfer of interest, which we will talk about, is a 15% increase. So let's go back to the chart. Your market value may say $1 million. But here on your taxable value, it's going to say $115,000. That's what you're going to be taxed on. I have a lot of taxpayers who I have conversations with, and they see that million, and they walk in the office and tell my appraisers or my staff or myself, you are out of your mind if you think I'm going to pay on $1 million. And I have to show them that this is what the market is, but this is what you're paying taxes on. Now, the question comes up to me is, Ms. Sanders, if I adjust that market value and appeal that market value, and there's a change in the market value, because we may agree there's a change, does it necessarily affect your cap value? Not necessarily. Because the market is what you're appealing. The market is what we're going to focus on. The cap number is a statutory number that's mandated by that code that we just saw, 1237-3140. And it tells us that if the market increases 15%, the most you can be taxed on is a 15% increase. I'm going to put the code back up. Here it is. So, and you see code 1243-12217? That's the reassessment code. That's where it directs you to say, when this happens, this is what happens. Okay? So, this is a 15% increase at the 5th year. So, let's go into the future. In 2028, when we're doing this again, the question is going to be, well, what happens then? Well, it's going to be a 15% on the 115 if market values increase more than a 15% increase. Now, regardless of what the market is doing. Now, if the market drops below that 15, if it goes right to, it'll probably be just right at that number. Now, I will say this. What we find is that with the 15% increase, some of our taxpayers who've been here or who've been in their property in place since 2006 when the legislation made Act 388, some people have upwards of 4 caps by this reassessment. Yeah. So some of my taxpayers will come in and say to me, Ms. Sanders, my neighbor is paying $1,000 and my tax bill is $4,000, and that is not fair. And I have to explain. Your property may be an assessable transfer interest. They have been the benefactors of a cap since 2006. Can't change that. It's driven by statute. Now, if you're one of those ones who got 4 caps, wonderful. You know, we have quite a number of people. Now, I will say this. Most of our property, if not all of them, going to reach that 15% cap. Because in Beaufort, we've been fortunate enough to have a very, very active real estate market. So most of our taxpayers are going to get that 15% cap or the 15% increase on value. So it's a limited value because it changes. By 2028, it'll change again. And here's basically, again, the code of law. And it only can increase at the time of the reassessment. So let me explain that. Okay. So it's a cap value, taxable value. Because you're going to see, when you go into the column, there was a market and a taxable and a cap. And then you had a new construction value. Well, new construction does not benefit from the cap. So if you have a new house and there's a cap on the land, then the land gets capped, but the building will not. So your taxable value and your cap value could be different. But at the end of the day, when you see your total taxable amount, that includes your new construction and your cap value, and it gives you your taxable number and what you're going to be taxed on. Again, market is as of December 31st, 2022. Assessable transfer interest. Those in the room that are new to purchasing property or real property in Beaufort County or throughout the state of South Carolina, if you purchase a property in 2022, then in 2023, that property will not be the benefactors of a cap. Okay? If you purchase a property in 2023, that property will not be, the cap will be removed as any cap is on the property from the prior owner. So it's a revaluation of the property. So what that means is that those particular properties who transfer interest, may I use you, sir, for example? I like to pick out one person to use. Okay, you're selling me your home, and you sold it to me for, I'm that $1 million person on that neighborhood that just trying to mess everything up. Well, what's going to happen? You're going to run away with your $1 million, and I'm going to and I'm going to see you in Riverbend with your $1 million, And what's going to happen is my property is now going to be revalued based on 12/31 of the year of the transfer. So regardless of what your property value is at or what your tax number is at, that property now is going to go to the full fair market value as of 12/31 of the year that it transferred. So all capping is removed. It's not a point of sale, so the valuation is not based on what he sold me for $1 million. The valuation is not necessarily based on that. It may, but it may not. And I'm going to highlight to kind of deviate for a minute. We bought the property for $1 million. He ran back to Riverbend with his $1 million. And the assessor's office determined that based on the other sales in the neighborhood, that property is only worth $500,000. Well, guess what? The assessor's office is going to value it at $500,000, and that taxpayer is going to be like, what happened here? I overpaid. It's based on the market. Or he's in Riverbend with his $1 million, and I got a property that's worth $2 million. He only got $1 million. But the assessor's office determined based on the activities of other individuals of like properties that property is worth $2 million. Taxpayer come in there mad with us. Well, where did you get that from? Well, he sold for $2 million, he sold for $2 million, he sold. And here's what the market is saying. So it's not a point of sale. That's a terminology that I'm trying to remove from the language of individuals, especially realtors in our community. There's no point, that actual terminology is not in the code of law. It's based on the fair market value as of an effective date. Property transfers are not considered, not all property transfers are considered ATIs. Let's talk about that. So if I decide to transfer my property to my husband, that's not considered an ATI. The capping will remain. If I pass away and my property is at legal resident, has a legal residency exemption, and I transfer it to my child, now the code does not give an age for a child. I have adult children, and that's true. I transfer it to my child, the capping will remain. If there's a divorce, capping will remain. Now, I will say this in defense of the assessor's office. We do not know all the individuals involved with a transfer. Last names could be different. I use myself, for example. My last name is Sanders. My daughter's last name is Bell. How is the assessor's office going to know that a Sanders and a Bell is related? It's not possible. Or if the property is transferred into a trust, the trust does own the property. However, the income beneficiaries of the trust is Ebony Sanders. But how is the assessor's office will know if the trust is in my dog's name? My dog's name is Dora. Dora LLC. How is the assessor's office going to know when that trust comes in Dora LLC that Dora LLC and the income beneficiary is Ebony Sanders? So we will make that adjustment and remove the capping, but then you can appeal, and then you provide the documents, and we'll put your capping back on. And capping is removed when the ATI occurs. That's just automatic. So, appeal. So if I disagree, I'm going to get an assessment notice in September or in a non-reassessment year. Anytime that you get something from our office, the assessment notice form, because it'll say that this is an assessment notice, you can appeal. You can appeal your fair market value. You can appeal your legal residency ratio. You can appeal the acreage. But there's one thing that you cannot appeal on that assessment notice is your cap value, because that's statutory driven. Now, I will say this, and if there's an issue with square footage that we've made, we do have those errors on our record, or we taxing you for something that you do not have, then, and if the cap value includes that item, we'll have to readjust the cap value because it doesn't make sense to have it removed at the market and not removed at the cap. So there's cases where we do change it. Now, I will tell you that when you get the assessment notice, a lot of my taxpayers, they'll throw it in the drawer somewhere or just look at it because it says this is not a tax bill. We don't want you to send taxes on that number that's on there because none of those numbers are your tax dollars. And they forget about it. And then when the tax bill comes out, that's when they react. There's a 90-day window. Keep that in mind. When you receive a tax assessment notice, there's and that's statute driven. Okay, so when September comes, by the end of September, if you have not received your assessment notice, please reach out to us in some form or fashion. Okay, the assessor's office. And I think everyone should have a pamphlet or brochure, and our contact information is there. But reach out to us so you can get your assessment notice, because it's very time sensitive with regards to appeals. Let's see. So, in a non-reassessment year, or if you have not received an assessment notice in a year that assessment notice was not generated for everyone, typically the law allows for a taxpayer to appeal throughout the entire year, from January 16th to January 15th of the following year. Okay, so I think I covered that pretty thoroughly about the 90 days. There's a citizen guide on our website. Here's our QR code. But additionally, in your pamphlet that I gave you, there's a QR code as well as our website where you can actually, this is a downloadable guide. I will tell our taxpayers that it has a lot of information in here that will help answer questions for you. There's frequently asked questions about the reassessment. But please take a moment. I know it's kind of dry reading, but take a moment to kind of review it because it's important. It's good information, and it's all statutory driven. So let's talk about legal residency special assessment, also known as 4%. There's a tax break available to full-time residents, okay? If you're a full-time resident and you're claiming your property as your primary residence, the law allows for the property owner to apply for the legal residency. Now, if you, go back, okay. So it's for full-time residents. I'm going to show you a demonstration of how much you can actually save with an example. And you must be the owner to qualify. So if the property is owned by someone else, then, and you living in a property, like renting it, then you cannot obtain the legal residency special assessment. You have to put in an application to our office, and there is a deadline that's different than the quadrennial reassessment. I'm going to show you that deadline, actually, for that, for applying for the legal residency. So how much can an owner save? I'm going to get out of the way because I want y'all to see this. Can everyone see this? Okay. So the example on your right is an example for a property in Hilton. This is a property. Both of these properties are in Hilton Head. They're actual properties, and they're similar in value. The property owner on the right is at 6%. You can see that tax bill is $7,612. The property on your left is similar in value. The total taxable amount is $2,902. Now, y'all may be saying, well, Ebony, y'all can't do math in the assessor's office. That's not a 2% difference, 6 and 4. No, that's not where the savings is at. The savings is that the 4% property owners are actually exempted from the school operation mills. That's where the adjustment is there, okay? So you can see, I like that 2009 versus that 7006. Okay, you can see the importance of this. Now, when we're going back to, in your memory, back to the assessment notice, you see there was a column that said ratio. If that particular property is your primary residence and you see a 6% there, contact our office. You can apply for the legal residency online, or you can come by one of our 2 offices, and someone is there to help you. In the brochure, it tells you exactly what you'll need to provide to prove residency to our office and some of the steps. Now, if you go to our website, where we would prefer everyone to apply online, it will actually guide you through what you will need to supply our office to receive the legal residency. Keep in mind, a property owner can receive only one special assessment for legal residency on a property in any jurisdiction that's code-driven. So if you're receiving a property in another state, they may call it homestead here. Homestead means something different. Then you cannot receive it here. Then there are some circumstances that may change that, but again, you can only receive it on one property. Another thing that we need to highlight with taxpayers, and I try to stress, is that if you apply for it here and you're receiving it somewhere else, and it comes to our knowledge that you were not eligible for the property that you applied for and you signed the certification, well, the law allows the assessor's office and the assessor to apply a penalty to our taxpayers. Now, I will tell you this is a nasty little beast. Very nasty little beast. What it basically does is this. You see that $2,902? You just gave Beaufort County a gift. Beaufort County keeps all that money that you paid. Then we're going to send you a bill for $7,612 plus penalties and interest on that property for being not eligible for the legal obtaining it, and you signed the certification. I had a taxpayer in Bluffton who has since passed away. When I became the assessor, it was still ongoing. His estate, the original tax bill, let me back up. He obtained the legal residency in Berkeley, Beaufort, and I want to say Georgia. He knew what he was doing. We caught him. His back tax bill that he owed Beaufort County was over $600,000. He passed away. And guess what? His estate ended up paying the amount of a little over $300,000 because there was some back and forth with appeals. And Ebony Sanders was like, I wasn't letting it go. But his estate paid it. And the reason why I stress that is because that money is owed to our children. That school operation educates our children, the future. So it's a nasty little penalty for a reason. And so I stress, if you're receiving it somewhere else, or if we're going to talk about rent, if you're renting your property, the law allows you to rent it up to 72 days. If you rent it more than 72 days, come to our office and say, listen, take that off. Because the law says that if you let us know there's a change within 6 months, then we can't do anything. Okay, we take it off. But beyond that 6 months, if we find out, we can really go after that taxpayer for receiving something they should not have received. Okay? I'm not going to dwell on the negative anymore. That just makes everybody sad. Okay, so what is required to qualify for this tax break? Okay, here are some of the requirements in your brochure that you received. The actual requirements are there, so you don't have to worry about memorizing that, as well as on the online, on the application online, the online application. So that's there for you. If you are a disability exemption for real property is done through South Carolina Department of Revenue. Disabled veterans, for those veterans in the room that are disabled, there's a really good exemption for you through the South Carolina Department of Revenue. You may be exempted out of 100% of your value and pay only your stormwater fees or any kind of municipality fees. But it's a nice exemption for our veterans. Homestead exemption is an age requirement based on age, and that's through the county auditor's office. Now, I will say this. Those two exemptions, the South Carolina Department of Revenue and the auditor's exemption, especially the Department of Revenue exemptions. If the Department of Revenue tells the assessor's office to put it on and tells me the percentage, we do not ask a question. We just do what they tell us to do. If the Department of Revenue said take it off a property, we take it off and we do not ask any more questions. So some of my taxpayers, especially my veterans, things are changed and the Department of Revenue will change it. I have to direct them back to the Department of Revenue because they're the regulatory agency for that exemption. So here is the important dates again. If it's a non-reassessment year or you did not receive an assessment notice, from January 16th to January 15th. This year is different, 90 days. If you're applying for the legal residency, it follows a similar January 16th to January 15th. And again, the objection period, I think I mentioned that, and you have your 90 days there. Here's our office location. We have one conveniently located here in Bluffton. It's at the Myrtle Park buildings, and it was on the third floor, second floor. I need third floor, so I got to update that. It's on the third floor. And we're on the second floor in Beaufort. Where am I doing? I'm having problems here. In the third floor in Bluffton. So here was our information here, and it's all on the brochure that I did give you. So here's my information here. My name is Ebony Sanders. I'm your county assessor. Here's the QR code that you can hit with your smartphones. And that's all I have for the presentation.
Ebony, you are here today to talk to us about property reassessment. So are there some key points we can extract from you for our residents, and maybe some reassuring ones about this whole process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, we would like to first educate everyone about the reassessment. As you mentioned in your intro, it does occur once every 5 years, and here we are, and we're going to have our reassessment since 2018. One thing I can assure you is that increases in your valuation does not necessarily mean there's going to be a dramatic increase in your taxes. You can go to our website, and on our website there's a reassessment guide for 2023. It's unique to this reassessment, and it actually explains what the reassessment is about and what it entails. But some key points that I'd like for you to keep in mind is, 1, you will receive an assessment notice around September of this year. 2, the valuations that's on that assessment notice doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes will dramatically increase. And 3, if you disagree with the valuation, you as a taxpayer have a right to appeal. But my suggestion is please appeal within the 90-day window that's recommended on the assessment notice.
I know this is so much information, but I loved the website. I loved the questions and answers. It debunked a few myths that even I had. Guilty. What are some of the tools that you use? Because like I've mentioned to people, are they going to come and check the new room I put on? And like some of the tools that help you to reassess the properties?
Well, some of the tools that we use in the reassessment valuation of the properties, we use building permits, we use sales that occurred in your neighborhood. We also look at what the market is indicating and how the valuation should be determined. Understand that when we're analyzing the sales, we're not pulling the number out of a hat. We're not just saying that's what it's going to be. Our staff are licensed appraisers, and they have determined the valuation based on what the market trends are doing. Now, one thing I would like to highlight is that in the reassessment guide, you're going to read about capping. Although your market value may increase, there's a cap value that you're going to be taxed on. So go back to the key point. That's one of the key points you need to really think about. But when we're looking at valuation, we look at the sales primarily, how the sales are performing, and what people are doing, buyers and sellers, and how they are performing in the market.
Ebony, that's a lot of information, but I think a few qualms might have been settled for some of us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.